Hello, 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 everybody. How are you doing? My name is Fani Reinders, and today we're going to be doing a little interesting experiment. It's the first on my stream. I'm going to be doing a dual stream with an old friend of mine, an old MVP friend of mine that I've met a couple of years ago at the MVP Summit, Florian Rappel. And what are we trying to achieve here is we're going to be taking a look at micro front ends in like a framework, or call it what you want, like I would say like a framework, or a tool that can help us build micro front ends. So if you are a microservice guy or girl and want to break up your monolith front end, you need to stay tuned because it's gonna get interesting. So, me and actually I just want to swap the screen over to my friend Florian. How are you doing, sir?
Great, thanks for having me.
Okay, that's great. Before we kick off, actually my music last time did not work, so this is actually it's not too loud, right? So let's just do that. Let's just see, because it's working now fine. Are you able to hear the music? Because it's not supposed to be disrupting you. You're not hearing anything. You're just hearing my voice. Cool. So we are here. You're in Germany. I'm in Netherlands. Roughly the same. Well, it is the same. What do you call it? Same time zone. Tell us a bit more about yourself. How have you been?
Great. So the past, let's say, year, I also changed positions. I'm now in a young startup, and what we are actually doing is, let's say, consultation and solution architecture, mostly in the space of digital transformation, so building platforms for companies that want to shift their business model into a digital space. And in this area also we transported some of the knowledge we had in micro frontends actually, and that's how we created this framework, which is now let's say in the last month or so a little bit brought into public from us. So we developed it in the open already starting in February, and now that's reaching a point where we say it's mature enough. We can invite the community to also make contributions to see how it looks like, to bring in improvements and ideas, and then to take the next steps. And so after all, I'm quite happy with the current state of this project, of my company where I'm in, and also in general about life so far.
That's great. So you say it's an open source project, right? So and you are one of the contributors.
Yeah, that's right.
Is the team big? Or is it
potentially the main contributor to it right now, source-wise, but we are a team of 7 people, and we also have, let's say, some backend services which you can use if you want to use the open source one. You don't need to use them, and a few other tools, and then of course we also deploy the solution at some of our clients. So here there are more guys than what meets the eye at first at work.
So building microservices can get hard, right? So it's a whole discussion. I don't want to go into the discussion of how we build backend microservices. The reason why you're here is to show off this project called Piral.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So let me just do a quick
just for me to kind of sketch the sort of background here. Having a monolith, what do you call it, like a monolith front end, it depends on your experience, right? So it tends to, if you have like hundreds of microservices and you want to be updating one of them, you probably also will end up updating your UI. And how does Piral help us solve this problem? By introducing micro frontend. So maybe onto that point, explain to us what is micro frontends.
So in essence, it's an old idea that if you want to modelize correctly, that means distributing, let's say, development tasks among different teams then you shouldn't stop at the back end, right? You also need the front end at the end. And the question for a long time was how to do that. Now, there are several patterns that emerged, and one of the patterns is, let's just have, let's say, different web servers in the backend. Could be then, let's say, full stack servers where the API in the front end is suddenly, again, server-side rendering something, doesn't matter. And bring them together on, let's say, some kind of a gateway layer. So usually that's done in a reverse proxy. And that, for some projects, works, and this is what is known today as a micro frontend. So essentially you have different teams, they all develop their own front-end part in isolation. That front-end part may use some backend or not, or may already have included that one. And then you just bring them together in a common layer like the reverse proxy. So that sounds, let's say, nice at first, and you talk about isolation and all that, but then that brings up a lot of problems, and this is where differences occur between backend and frontend. For instance, in the backend, you can say, oh, let's just pick always the best tool for the job, right? So you say you have service A that's using .NET, you have service B that's using Go, and so on and so forth. So there is then a problem with the front end, because here, just using, let's say, Angular in one component, React on the other, they're not playing so nicely together. Yeah. Even if you make them play nicely together, you still have some issues. And the most pressing issue is, in the backend, it doesn't matter how the code looks like, right? So, I mean, you just need a common interface, like an API, to talk from one service to another. In the front end, though, you still want to present to the user consistent UI, which means you may want to use components that really behave the same. So for me as a user, it shouldn't matter if I now look at, let's say, the product catalog or my shopping basket. I expect that a drop down in one behaves the same as in the other, right?
Yes.
And if one is developed in Angular, the other one is developed in React, it may not behave the same, because now we are not entering only where CSS or some styling comes in, but where actual behavior is also coming in. And of course, one can now think about how should I develop my Angular code that it behaves 100% the same as the React one. But in our opinion, that's if you have this problem, then things are sideways anyway. So the concept of, let's say, bringing together different frameworks may be appealing for micro frontends as it is appealing for microservices. But in our opinion, what's more appealing is actually the ability to develop independently, so to speak, in isolation features that can be just deployed. You don't need to see where it gets merged together, and it just gets rolled out, and that's it. That's in a micro frontend, because in the end it allows you to really develop small modules that can just be shipped. And these modules should not now, as the traditional micro frontends, be, let's say, merged in a gateway layer, so server side already, but in our opinion it should just happen client side, and this is what Piral is about, and Piral brings to the table. We actually see it more like, what serverless was for in the whole microservice space, where we say, okay, we now take the concept of a shared runtime that's still allowing isolation, and that brings different advantages, and we can now just ship that in form of a framework called Piral to the end user. So that is, let's say, a framework that allows you to develop such a serverless, or we call them actually siteless UI for your own. So it's a kind of a specialized micro front-end solution. But seeing is believing, and I think a small demo would shed some light.
I just want to quickly also just swap the screen around. I think, let me just see. We have that's fine. The one that we're looking for. I think that's the one, yes. Let's go full screen, and then I think, I've got a little duplicate myself there. That should be fine. Let me just see. Vote. There we go. That's much better.
We are in the console right now. Yes. So
if you can maybe just scroll up your console a bit, maybe just put in a few returns.
Or something like that. So just to recap, so Piral is a framework that allows you to build applications that then leverage these microfrontends or make it possible to develop microfrontends. And this is the one part, and this brings you something that we would call an application shell. The other part is the modules that actually deliver the business functionality or the actual functionality for your application. And we call these modules pilots.
Okay, so it's not like your Tom Cruise. It's actual micro little front end.
Yeah. So you have Piral, one Piral, so to speak, versus a lot of pilots. Maybe just to let's have a visual before we dig into code here. Let me just open a browser here. Show you a small demo portal that we have.
1 second, I think we have our
a delay.
No, there's a delay for some reason. Just want to see if we can figure this out quickly.
Okay.
I can't really hear the echo myself, but I think it's in Skype settings somewhere. Let me just see if I can settings. Oops. Let me just take this screen here. I can see what I'm doing. 1 second. Settings. Where's my settings screen? Oh, there we go. Okay, this should be fine. Was it using? I was using the wrong mic. I should be using. What should it be using now? Why is it? 1 second.
Sure.
So we are back. Just want to go back to our chat quickly. Gerald and Martin, welcome, folks. Is there still a echo? Maybe just say something, Florian, and they will immediately.
Echo? No or yes?
Echo? No or yes? Maybe they will, or they actually like decided to leave, but they're still there. Most probably, I'll just ask them.
Okay.
Let me just quickly ask them. I'll ping them. So, still echo. In any case, we can just. We will. I think it will go away. Cool.
All right.
I don't see any echo. Okay, let's just go back to screen. Apologies about that. Let's just see if we can continue. I will just maybe monitor it from my side to see if it's fine. So just maybe just restart that thought and then go on.
Sure. All right. So what I just wanted to show. Is a little bit the idea of this thing as a Piral, as an app shell instance, and the pilots as the modules. So here you see, for instance, one of the applications that we build using Piral. It's just, let's say, what you could consider an intranet portal, but actually it's just a demo portal. So all you see is actually more or less dummy work. It's a real thing, but it's not like actively used. In this screen, we have some kind of a dashboard functionality. We have also, let's say, these two tiles, and here we have some links somewhere, right? And I can also click on one of these tiles, it loads something, I get to a page, I can also go back, I can go back into the other thing, so that all looks fairly nice. This is a micro front end. However, this is a micro front end. How can we see that? I here have an online service. Yes, can you still hear me? Yes, can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think the echo is. It was there.
Should we continue?
I think the echo.
Should we continue?
So, I've now managed to figure out my mixer. Okay, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Okay. To continue that thought. All right. To continue that thought. So let me here just let's say press two buttons. Disable them. And now let's disable them. And now let's see. This thing looks rather empty, right? So now this thing looks rather empty. Here a link is gone. We have no tiles here. And also the pages, for instance, here's the vacation planner. That's now a page not found. That's now a page not found. There's nothing here, right? So let me just enable one of the two. Let me just timesheet, for instance, here. Let me just refresh this page. Not a timesheet is there. Not a timesheet is there. And we can do the same with vacation. It's okay. It's maybe a nice trick. Maybe from the backend we just say, oh, that's not there or not there. And in fact, somehow we're right. But in fact, we don't have any code here on the front end side to check here on the front end side which modules are there or not there. We just say give us modules, and then the modules would actually hook up everywhere here on the screen where they're going to hook up. So, for instance, the vacation planner wants to hook up in the menu down here. It just makes this happen, right? It just makes this. They want to present a tile. Obviously, the tile is there. Now, you can do some other cool stuff with that. Once you modularize the code, and you saw we can enable and disable, so we can do even a little bit more. So, since this is a demo portal, we added one simple thing just for demo purposes. We said, okay, awesome. Let's just let me grab, I may need to write that. Let me set a special key here. I think, what was it? Was the user type. Set item user type to boss. Was it the right one? We will find out in a second when I refresh this one. And the user type sent here is boss, for instance.
Yeah.
And now you see I only get one of the two tiles. Also the vacation link is gone. And the reason is the vacation pilot was now not transported. You can also see that in the response we get from the feed service, which is the service that in the end delivers all these pilots. So when we look here, the response here is just a single pilot. So it has just one. Now, if I make a local storage.clear, let's refresh again. We see it now transports a different user type, normal, and here we get 2 pilots. Now that's quite nice. I mean, of course, this is an artificial example because usually you wouldn't transport it via query parameters. Obviously you can, you would rather transport it via, you know, a JWT or a cookie session and so on that's then connected on the backend read out. You can do all of that, but for demonstration purposes that already shows this. And here our service supports all that. So for instance, it was, I think, the vacation planner. So what you can see there, we have some rules. You can just go in there and it has a rule, don't ship for the boss. So let's just edit that, and here you see it just goes into the query. It says if there's a user type and that is boss, then the action is on block, for instance. So it's a very simple way with these modules to introduce something like feature flags. So you only ship code that you want to ship for particular users under particular circumstances, which is quite nice. And you get that out of the box because you modularized the code already. So the code knows nothing about these feature flags, but your service may now know, and so you just ship in your front end what actually should be delivered as a functionality.
So just to quickly stop you there, this feed.piral.io, is that kind of a sort of a shared service that you need to call to make this work?
You need a feed service, but you don't need this particular feed service. So that's just this feed Piral is just the offering from our side. It has a free tier, which is the standard tier, and it you can start development using feed.piral.io, which is a nice way in our opinion because it really makes it possible to have a serverless environment. Because in the end you just need your Piral instance somewhere, and that can now live on a static storage like an S3 on Amazon or Azure Blob Storage, or even GitHub Pages, or your Dropbox public folder if you want to have it there. It just works, and you don't need any infrastructure for that. So it's quite nice to start with. If you have, let's say, custom needs, then we recommend just developing your own feed service. It's not difficult. We also have a sample out there. We have a specification out there too. So anything you need to know is written down or already exists in code. So you can, but this allows you to get started without needing to deploy your own server somewhere. You can just go ahead and play around with it.
And because it's open source, I can just take this. Is this even the feed also open source?
So we have a sample of that open source, but this feed service is proprietary. And at its core, it uses, of course, the same mechanism as the sample, but it's just more scalable and has more features. Like, for instance, integrated feature flag management already, single sign-on connectivity for especially interesting in enterprises and all that. It also has special audit capabilities that you can, for instance, make certain rules that pilots not obeying to these rules cannot be pushed and all that. So there's a rich feature set behind that where we say, these features are just so good that you want to buy into that at the end. But again, you don't need that. I mean, you can start with the free tier 2, that's just good for development. And if you want to ship your own feed service, then we got the specification out there and a sample code that also works just locally. It's a Node.js Express-based sample. That's open source. And
so you can just implement yours, the specification, and then you can have your own.
Yeah, so the specification is live at docs.piral.io. You can then just go in here into reference. We have the specifications, and there you go into feed API specification, and it talks a little bit about this server, how the API looks like, so what you need to transport back per pilot. And so all in all, I think this is where the direction is. And then, as said, we have at github.com/smartbeard, we have also a sample pilot service, which is the Node.js Express based one. So if you want to look, for instance, how did we solve in here the uploading of pilots, then you can just also go in here, and I guess at endpoints you'll find where we have the post somewhere defined, the publish we call it, I think, and you'll see it's not much code, and shouldn't be too complicated. I mean, also building that, for instance, in .NET, we also built that service in .NET Core for some customers. It's fairly straightforward to replicate, at least from the given Node.js code.
This is cool. Great stuff. So are we going to be building stuff now, or are we just going to be talking about...
No, so that was just now, let's say, the introduction that you see how that may look like in the end. So again, you got the two parts. You got the app shell, which defines, or what we call a Piral instance, which defines the overall layout and defines a bit where now the pilots can put their stuff in. And then you make the pilots. And the question is then, making a pilot, how complicated is that? And it turns out it's not so complicated. So all you need is actually just npm. So you say npm init pilot, and that would be it. So all I did here in this example, I hope we can see the screen, is I went into a folder, I created a new empty one, and then I just call this command, and it will now do all the rest for me. I mean, again, this assumes you already have an application shell somewhere, like this demo portal that we've seen. Because that's where we will build this pilot now for. We don't need to wait, like we can come back to it. I did already all that in here, called Piral test. And I can now say, actually I think it's already running, and I can now say npm start, and the outcome is what we can see here in the terminal. It just starts a development server, localhost 1234. Of course, I can change the port if I want to.
Sorry, that localhost 1234. That is your feed service, right? Or is not? Is that just the host of?
That's not the live debugging server for building now this pilot. So the feed service, you can also start locally one, but you would, by default, it does not start. I mean, it makes only sense then for building a full application shell. And even then, I mean, you could start with feed.piral.io, but yeah, so there are different ways. But if you develop your own pilot, what I do here, then you don't need the feed service for this. And maybe it sheds some light when we do here finish the scaffolding. So when I do the npm init pilot, I get asked a couple of questions. We have also, let's say, a naked command line tooling where you can also initialize your pilot via, let's say, command line flex. So this is the more, let's say, scriptable approach, but this is good to see already how this looks like. So the first question here for npm init pilot is the most crucial one.
Sorry,
it says, what's the source package containing a Piral instance?
Florian, you go ahead. I just quickly need to go downstairs for 1 second, but you go ahead and continue. I'll be back in like 1 second. Is that fine?
Awesome.
Yeah. Just do your thing.
So let me fill that out. And so here we can say what's the name of the package that we want to create a pilot for, and I just go and say sample Piral. Sample Piral refers to what we say is the demo of a Piral instance, and that looks like this. So in the end, we want to develop something that lives in this instance. All right. Then I need to say target directory dot is good. Where do we get this sample Piral from? Standard npm registry in this case, can also be a custom one. Do we want to skip the installation? No. Nothing should be overwritten. TypeScript is good. And we, let's say, start with the default boilerplate. We'll see what that means in a second. It's just that a little bit of code is already filled out. So then it goes ahead and fetches all the dependencies. And let me just stop this one here for a second. So what this in a nutshell does is it gives you an emulator that allows you to develop your pilot locally and see it running locally as if it would run online. And that's the same idea that you have in serverless computing. So when you, let's say, develop an Azure function, you also cannot just let it run because you're missing the runtime. So what you download for running it is the emulator, and that's the same thing here. Now the difference is we don't have, let's say, a generic emulator. Your emulator is your particular Piral instance that you created. So in this case, it's the sample Piral instance. But it could also be the SmartPure portal that we've seen, or some of, let's say, portal solution of one of our customers. So it always depends who created an app shell and where do you want to create the pilot for. Now the npm installation may take a little while.
I'm back, by the way.
The full set. Awesome. So just to recap also for you. Yes. We filled out the questionnaire here. As I already said, the most crucial question is the first one. What's the Piral instance you want to develop your pilot for? And we said sample Piral. That's not the same application that we saw beforehand. That's not the SmartPure portal. What that is, it's an application that looks like this. It's the Piral sample app. It's just a demo we have online.
Okay. So each one of these blocks.
Why we do that? Just why do we need to say that when?
No, I was asking each one of these blocks are little pilots.
Yeah. So in this case, that's true. But a pilot could also, of course, register more of the tiles, right? So that's just tiles here on the screen, but each tile may contain so. A pilot may deliver more, right? A pilot may deliver also menu entry, like here, for instance, we see the menu entries. A pilot may also deliver pages, like, for instance, Mario 5 as a page. So here I can play Mario, right?
Cool. So it's not just a component per se; it's a sort of a thing that merges in your page. So it's like fragmented.
Yeah, it's a collection of components, let's say. So it's technically, a pilot in the end is nothing more than just a tarball, an npm package that contains a set of JavaScript and all the assets that you need, style sheets, images, and so on, all just in a package bundled together. But we can see the contents of a pilot in a second. And there's one difference to, let's say, just naked JavaScript files. In the end, it's a library, and that library exports one function that's called setup. And this setup is called from the application shell in the end. Okay, also back to this one here. So why do we need to install the application shell package here? The reason is that serves us as an emulator. Think about developing an Azure function. You cannot just run the Azure function. That's not possible, because what you miss is the right runtime, right? Yeah. So what you download when you press F5 is an emulator of the runtime that is in the Azure environment, and that then runs your Azure function that you developed locally. Okay. And that's the same here. So in order to run your pilot, you need an emulator, and we use as the emulator the application shell that you want to develop your pilot for. So the end experience looks as follows. Let's just npm start this thing.
Every time you say pilot, I keep on thinking, is it a POC? Is it a is it a POC? You know, pilot. I have to kind of
Yeah. Also, for me, it's the other way around. Now, for me, always when someone says we're doing a pilot, I'm thinking, why do you want to build a module for an application you don't have?
But
they are thinking of, pilot application. So, or anyway, it's maybe too similar. Awesome. So I'm still getting this one from Pilot Scaffold demo. Sorry.
So does
this one.
Does this need to be in JavaScript all the time, or can there be any other implementations?
Yeah, in the end, of course, it needs to be JavaScript, but you can write whatever you want to. Let's look at how the code looks. What was scaffolded? Maybe that helps. Now, we selected in the scaffolding TypeScript as language. At the moment, we have in this boilerplate JavaScript and TypeScript. You can, of course, come up with your own programming language or anything that transpiles in the end to JavaScript. That all works.
Blazor would be nice.
Yeah, since we support Wasm, it's possible. So you can write Blazor. I mean, in the end, as I said, it only needs to output something that's compatible. So Wasm, we also
cool.
support. Okay, so now what was scaffolded? Of course, a tsconfig because we selected TypeScript, a package JSON, okay, a couple of dependencies in there. So all of these dependencies are not necessarily, let's say, required in general, but for this app shell, they are already included, so we include them here too. As you see, there are not real dependencies, they're just dev dependencies, just to, that you can have the full spectrum. And then all we did is an index.ts. That's about it. Okay, so it already scaffolded a couple of things. This is just a default boilerplate. We could have also said empty, then nothing would be in there. It already has show notification, register menu, and register tile.
Okay.
Now,
and that it also could be register page, if you have a page.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see that in a second. But first of all, I need to somehow figure out, maybe I still have from beforehand, I worked on a service worker here, and that may now still be active. So let me just unregister that one. It's not related to our current one, but it, spits in, because the service worker registers on the domain, it just spit in. Now, I make now side by side these things, the editor and the web application. So here we see the hello from Piral, right? So that's this notification. We also see here documentation. So that's the register menu. That's the menu entry that we registered.
Cool.
Let me just throw those two things out and save. Now the thing is gone, right? But you see the menu is still open.
I see.
Nice, right? Now I can also change here the tile to 4x4, for instance. Now we have 4x4. Now I could say, yeah, okay, cool. Let's just give it a different style. This is all just standard React. So here there's nothing where you say that is now Piral custom. I mean, the only Piral custom thing is actually this setup function, and of course all that we do with app. But the rest, I mean, this is just a standard React component, and that's about it. So yeah, there's nothing custom about it.
But it could be Angular as well, as long as it's basic HTML and JavaScript, right? Right. So at the end, it just needs to transpile to JavaScript, and that's about it. Now I can use also other standard React stuff, like here I use, for instance, a link from React Router DOM, and I could say, okay, let's go to my page. Let's make it maybe also flex 1, that I now can hover over it and any click will trigger. So now we are at the nice page not found page. Cool.
Because we didn't, of course, register anything, and you already said, well, but we can register page, and of course you're right. So here we have a couple of options, and we can say register page. So let's just register page for the my page route. A React component, which is as simple as a function, and I can just say, hey, this has a title, my awesome page. And that's it. Now suddenly this is my awesome page. I can go back to home,
okay.
and Now I can of course continue developing this thing, and the nice part about it is of course that, as you have seen, it's the development part is really fast. I mean, you get the usual experience that you expect. It just reloads, and it does it without destroying the state. So I can of course register now as a menu entry for this. I can just say awesome, let's have another link, maybe let's copy this one from here, and say my page, and here it is. Right? So now I go here, I go there, it just works, and it's quite a nice experience. Of course, all I know about a module system still just works, so I could also say, now the page is growing and growing, let's just make it in a new file. So I just put this page component here. And sorry for the noise in the background, there's we have a little visitor and who doesn't want to sleep.
I think Piral is more interesting.
So the whole Piral stuff is always so exciting,
exactly.
So it makes it difficult to sleep. Yeah, we just export this here, nice. So we can also say, yeah, let's just here get the page. Nothing changed in that regard, right? So page still works. Just as a proof, I will add some lorem ipsum, and here it is. So everything just works. When we have it as a page, we can also do some lazy loading, because at the moment, this is a standard problem in front-end development, right? Your JavaScript code base grows and grows, and suddenly you have 2 or 3 megabytes of a JavaScript bundle, and that's not scalable. And especially here, when you have all these registers and the page, you know, will only be triggered or only be used if the user goes on the page, right? So why would you need all the code right away for the page? And especially dependencies of that page. So what you can do here is, for instance, you can just say, hey, it's a React lazy. So again, that's also standard. We don't do anything here. We can just say, yeah, additionally, we have a default export. That's it, export default page, default export, and we just make an import function call to the page, and that's it. Now this thing is lazy, and
page
when
crashed.
Okay, that's bad. Why does it? Let's just do we have a problem here? Yes or no? Let's find out. Let's just restart that to see if we are still sane or not. Okay, so need to have a look into that. Usually it just worked. Maybe we didn't define something in our app shell here for it. That's bad. Always comes out in demos.
No problem.
Good question. Can we just solve it? Is it really... We have 2 here, it should not matter. Okay, but that's what should be used, right? So I'll need to look into that. If we have an issue there, if there's something slipping through our hands. It's the 09 release, but actually on the first client it looks good. Let's see if I can...
There we go.
Cannot find module page TSX. Well, actually, you should find it. So I guess it's a problem in the compilation here, but yeah, so maybe a real bug. So sorry for that. Good that it came out, but
log issue.
But let's bring it back to something that works from our point of view. But that's a little bit the idea. So you can use just standard things. It's all standards driven, and the only thing that that Piral gives you is actually this way to wire it all up, where you define now in your application shell what API is available. Now there's a standard API. You can also define this API on your own, and then you define, for instance, what it means to present content and all that. So pretty much you define the layout, and that's about it. So I mean, in the end, it's just this standard JavaScript file. Now that's the minified version for let's say debugging. If I run build pilot, let's see. then we should actually see this one being changed, and now you see it's all minified, and it's pretty much the least code possible.
So your application, so you have a shell and you have like little pellets running in that shell, right? And your shell being your piler.
The shell is what we call a Piral instance.
Or Piral.
Because Piral is the framework. We call it the Piral instance, or an instance of this framework. Or you can also say it's an application using this framework. And then you have all these pilots that are bringing the actual functionality in there.
And do you need to know during design time which pilots you're going to be using, or can it be kind of in runtime? You don't even know. There's a team in India, for instance, that's developing a pilot for application, and only when it's on production you see it.
That's more the way of thinking. It's a difficult way of thinking because we're not. So Piral is now, let's say, quite new, but this kind of, let's say, architecture we developed now for a couple of years, and we have also quite some applications running in production using this architecture. And this way of thinking to say, we don't know what modules will be in there, is difficult, especially for designers, because they say, in the menu we have now these 5 entries, and you say, no, actually you may have as a user, but depending on where the user sits, we enable or disable modules, then maybe tomorrow a new module ships, so you can never say it's just these 5 entries, right? We just open the where the menu is as a mounting point, and now everyone can just say, I have another menu item to place there. And so this is a little bit the scalability thinking, where you say, you don't know what's happening, you just say, I open this up, the modules, this is difficult. And, this is not a technical difficulty then in the end. I mean, maybe a little bit it is, but it's mostly, let's say, design-wise and thinking-wise difficulty.
So you'd still have one project per se for all your pellets?
You can do as you want to. So what you usually do is you have one repository per pilot. So each team works on its own repository, has its own CI/CD pipeline for that. It's all completely isolated. You can, of course, also say you have a monorepo where you throw all your pilots in. You can also make a hybrid where you say all pilots regarding, let's say, a certain domain, you put in one repo. You can do that. You can, let's say, the biggest advantage of now having also micro frontends together with microservices is that it gives you another dimension of cutting, right? So beforehand you had, let's say, you kept the backend already split, but the frontend was the monolith, so you had one big team for that, and you needed lots of communication and all that. And now you can also, let's say, draw verticals in there, and it's now up to you. Do you have, let's say, teams for front-end and back-end pieces, or do you have front-end and back-end together in one team, or you still have a big front-end team, you may still have a big back-end team. It gives you just another dimension of cutting and gives you a lot of flexibility. So what we usually have seen with this kind of architecture is that we saw little full-stack teams arising, where one team was doing a back-end service and was doing, let's say, pilots, or the pilot that was mostly consuming the backend service. Maybe not alone this backend service, but still, dominantly.
But you can totally do it like one team can control. One team can control, for instance, one pilot with its API, right? That's also possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll have one repo for both the microservice and its pilot. So to say. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around the shell. Where does the shell live?
That can live wherever you want it to live. So, for instance, we have one project where the shell is rolled out together with a Node.js-based backend service, you can call it. You can also call it the backend of this app shell. That just serves it directly from its file system, the app shell, and also brings in, let's say, cookie management and that stuff. We have also seen other projects where, for instance, if you take this SmartPiot portal that we've just shown, that just lives on an FTP. So there's no, let's say, dynamic backend behind it in any sense. Usually you deploy actually the app shell on just some static storage. It doesn't need any backend functionality. Unless you do, of course, certain things, like, for instance, server-side rendering. Then,
exactly.
of course, you need, let's say, a Node.js server running. But if you just treat it, let's say, as a front-end resource, then it's sufficient to have it on a static storage.
Do you have an example of that nearby or not?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I said, the SmartPeer portal is essentially just a FTP deployment. So that one is really just served from a static storage. There's no backend coming in here whatsoever.
And when it runs on, it talks to the feed service to figure out which pillar to load.
Yeah, I mean, I can also run this locally, therefore, right? So let's see. Do I have that locally here? Let's just see if I have it here. I think I got it. Portal. I don't have it on this machine. That seems like I don't have it here. Sample portal. That's another thing, though. Maybe I can just clone it, but yeah, I mean, the sample, yeah, that may be a good thing. So this sample app that we see here,
yeah,
storage, and I can just start that. So that's the demo full, for instance. And I think I got this port still using, or is it not? I think it's free. So that's now doing the same thing locally, but it really just serves from the file system. I could also open a HTTP server, maybe in a second, to do that. And when it's done, it's a fresh build. Let it take a second. And let me go here, and you see this is now served locally, but it's the same.
I see.
Just this one is presented in English.
German.
Let's also make it 0. So it's the same. Oh, I've got another picture here, but this is anyway coming from the backend. Some image service. Yeah, so that's a little bit the idea. So I can just play around with it, and do that. And again, it's not magic. It's here. It's just in the demo full folder. We have a develop, and you see the app. This is just all the files, and potentially I could just maybe not, because this one is wired up now.
Yeah.
But if I would build now a production build, then actually you would see it can be just served locally too, right? So yarn build demo full. See. So this now builds a full demo. And
so
when
this
finished,
this does not build your pillets with your shell. This builds it
exactly.
separately.
This is the separation. So you build the app shell completely independent. The app shell also doesn't ever say, give me this pilot or this pilot. You just say, go to the feed service, and now the feed service will tell you what pilots are there for you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it makes me think it's almost like what's that Google Tag Manager, almost, in a sense.
you can think of it like that too, right? So it's this way where you just bring in another backend component to actually be, let's say, the man in the middle, and therefore decouple the two things. So now you see I'm now serving this from 8080, and I just
Cool.
Now having this folder is essentially what I would upload to an FTP server, for instance. Essentially these files. That's it.
And tell me quickly, pilot to pilot communication, is that possible in this version?
It is possible,
or would you just do something like
even though you would not say, oh, I'm pilot A, I want to talk to pilot B, because pilot B may not be there and you should not know that there is a pilot B.
Exactly.
But there are other ways. Let me just maybe show you one more demo. So there are, let's say, 3 ways to share things between pilots. One is over events, so you can just emit an event, and another one could actually receive the event, and that works great. The other one is via a global data container. So we have already a global state container, but usually you don't access that. But with the global data container, I mean, that's one piece where all pilots can also have access, and one can own a data there, one pilot, and all other pilots can access that data then. So that's great. You can not only put in, let's say, data like a number or a string, you can also put in functions and stuff like that. And the third way, and that's actually the preferred way, is via a mechanism we call extensions. And extensions is a nice thing, because it allows you to actually say, I have a component to offer, and ignore this lit element for the moment. It's the next branch, so that's not ready yet. But let's look at the other things here. I mean, these are all tiles. And this demo shows 2 things. First of all, it shows that we offer an extension now written in React or in a standard way, and we can just consume that. Actually, I don't know why it's not shown here, and here it's also missing. But yeah, okay, strange things happening tonight. But it's shown everywhere here, so we are consuming this one. It's called just from React. Actually, I know why it's not there. And so we can just consume it. So it's the one thing. And the other thing is that this way is a very generic way to actually, show that, for instance, have here some code from Vue.js, and it works obviously, but you also can render something from React. And let me also, for this one demo, sorry, just I know where the problem is coming from here, so I want just to deactivate the lit element, because that's, as I said, it's work in progress. Lit just deactivate this. So, because, as I said, work in progress, and it actually messes up the 2 angulars here. Should not be like that.
Is it a good thing, asking a front-end expert like yourself, to have multiple front-end frameworks on one browser rendering? Or would you say rather keep it to one?
It's actually not a good thing, so that's why we don't recommend it. But we still have all these integrations. So what you see in this one demo, where you have, let's say, a multitude of frameworks, is exceptional, and you should not do that. Besides, of course, demos where you can then show or not show that all the things are just working side by side without clashing. Well, as we have seen, the lit element now would actually provide a collision, but that's a work in progress. It's nothing we shipped yet. So we just do that now for demo and a little bit, let's say, controlling purposes. Why do we offer these integrations? They are all optional, so you need to install a plugin. So let's say a plugin for Angular, a plugin for Hyperweb, you need to install plugins for all these integrations. But we offer them still because you may have the scenario where you have a large code base already written in one of these technologies, and you now want to still use Piral, and you want to, let's say, have a soft migration path. And this allows you to do that, because you can just say, okay, it's not the most optimal thing, but for migration purposes, I now bring in the, let's say, AngularJS opt-in plugin. And that allows me now to just reuse my existing AngularJS components, just define a pilot, which you saw, it's just a export function setup, and that's it. And then in there we define how are the different components now mounted somewhere, and that's it, and nothing more. The rest just works. And that's why we bring the NIM. So to give users the flexibility of saying, okay, I want to use Piral, but I cannot afford a hard cut here. I want to have a soft migration path, and this gives you the soft migration path. At some point in the future, you can just discard now the AngularJS plugin, let's say, and you just have one framework. So ideally, you just use React. That's what we call the greenfield approach. But we also know that there are a lot of applications already written, and especially in older frameworks, especially when the web moved forward quite fast. And this gives you the opportunity of just having the soft migration.
This is awesome stuff. So now the inventing, you can also just, if you choose to implement inventing between the two pilots, you can choose anything, but that will be a kind of a infrastructure concern based on your shell, right? Because your shell needs to kind of host that bus.
Yeah. So in essence, you make all your pilots dependent in some sense on the app shell. We actually have in our documentation, let's say, kind of best practices in our guidelines. So we call them pilot best practices, where we're actually advocating having the least dependency on the app shell. And that means only having a dependency in the file where you have the setup defined. So that should be the only way. So in a nutshell, it looks then like, where do we write it? I think it's separate data from views. I think it's already written in here. Actually, maybe not have it included, or I don't find it now for the second. Bundle splitting. Testing extensions. I thought we have it here. Maybe it's in another section and not in the best practices. So yeah, maybe. I forgot now where we write it explicitly. Maybe in the pilot API. No, I don't want to scoof over it without being fully prepared here, but we wrote about this. Actually, I could also just search. And we actually advocate not, let's say, having a dependency in all the files. So it doesn't matter if it will anyway only be, let's say, a type dependency, because you don't get anything functional from the app shell. What you get is this app thing that is the first parameter, or the only parameter of the setup function. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing you get. So you cannot, let's say, import something that is functional. You need to rely then on this app, and that's the API that you get in your pilot. And actually every pilot gets its own API object, so you also cannot mess around with this thing and destroy other pilots. That's not possible. We isolate the pilots just to make sure that when one pilot goes rogue or has a bug, it doesn't affect the other pilots.
Yeah, that's important, because you don't want one team's stuff to break your stuff.
Exactly. And we don't strip out, for instance, the dependency to the document or to the DOM in general, so you can still make DOM manipulations. So that's still very cruel. It's something that we also think about, but at the moment it's just performance impact, and let's say it would drastically cripple a development experience, so we're not doing it. You can still audit on this though, so which is one of the things, of course, our feed service can also audit against, that you're not making direct DOM manipulations and stuff like that. But yeah, so in that regard, it's still, the window is open, but anything, regarding, for instance, pilot API and all that, we really isolate. And when a component crashes, like a page component, it also does not influence the whole thing. That's also what we do. So we just see page crashed and that's it. That's not nice, of course, but the application just keeps on running.
Is the Pilar? Get it wrong. Pilar is the Piral Piral website using dog fooding for its own site?
only the feed services. So all these things like the Piral docs or our landing page, they're just static pages. They're not using Piral because there are no modules in here. We potentially in the future also use Piral for it. We're not sure for the starting page, but maybe for the docs it can already be useful. We don't know yet. These two are just static React pages at the moment. Source code is, by the way, in our repository of the 2 pages.
Cool.
But for the feed.piral.io, which is a more, let's say, web app where we bring in other functionality, we use Piral under the hood. Yeah. So the feeds itself, it's quite nice actually. So yeah, its API is also the feed for contains the feed for to display it. So if it's down, it's anyway fully down.
This is interesting. Thank you so much for showing me this, because in the past couple of 5 or 6 streams I've been doing on my own, I've been doing like a live coding sessions on a legacy application that I've taken. It's from my folks. It's like a app that they use to make job cards from, and it's built in Windows Forms way back like 12-13 years ago. It was built on VB.NET, and I took that example or that actual code, and I'm trying to refactor it to, well, I took it to .NET Core, and it's WinForms, but it's not cross-platform yet. So the idea is to take it all the way to Blazor and still have it a kind of a native UI. And I was thinking, when I go full-fledged web or wherever I go, I wanted to implement a micro front end, because it's got a CRM component, and it's got a kind of a job management component. So you can see those as little pilots. And I was actually looking for a framework that can help doing these kind of things, so to test it out to see if this will actually work. So maybe we can still feature this later on in my stream on the actual application. That will be cool if it works. But we'll see how the Blazor thing turns out, because you say you do support WebAssembly.
WebAssembly support, so we use underneath as a bundler Parcel, and Parcel supports WASM. So yeah, that should work. But it's a first, so we never bundled in WebAssembly, but it should just work. If not, then let's file an issue for that. Let's improve it, and that would be the idea. That would be awesome to get that up to speed.
Okay, great. And I just want to quickly get, if you just can send me a link on Skype. I just want to put it on the chat for the folks that want to contribute to the repo. And I've already posted the Piral.io website. Just if you can just send me those links quickly, I can just put them on the chat. And
sure. Awesome. I'll do that. Great. So let's do this. And let's do the...
there we go. Let me see. Boom, 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 boom. This is the... Okay, so this one I need to copy and to paste this one in there. So that is the actual repo of Piral. Wow, it was great catching up again, Florian. So we'll
Same here.
So next time I'll see you most probably will be in Seattle, or before we will see. Am I going to Germany? No, I'm not. You're not going to Netherlands anytime soon, right?
Oh, let's see. Maybe if there's a cool conference, if the time fits, I'm always happy to come. Because
we're talking obviously about next year now. So this year is basically getting. Did you know? Fun fact. For this decade, there's a few days left only. Think about it. The decade is gone. It's like, for me, it's like, hey, actually a few days and the decade is gone. It's not just a year, the decade is gone.
That's right. It's the 5th of the century then.
Yes, exactly. Well, it was nice. It was nice chatting to you. And then it was a bit of a bummer that our stream kicked off a bit weird with the sound, but apparently it's fixed. but I think we have had like a dip in viewers. But this is recorded, and let's stay in touch. And for all the folks that did watch, thank you so much. It was great having you on board. It was a bit quiet in the chat rooms because of the audio and etc. And also it's a topic that not a lot of people really understand. So I think it was a good attempt. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.